Ladies and gents, welcome back. Now, I've been at this for going on about a year now. It's insane the growth that's been happening. But what's more insane is how much more about politics, journalism, all this stuff I've been learning about. And one organization that I actually was not aware of before this year was the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and the amazing work that they've been doing. And to talk more about it, I've actually brought on Franco Terrazzano to the show. Did I pronounce that right? I always get the names wrong. Terrazzano.
Oh, so close, man. There it is. There it is. So close.
Thank you for joining. And I just want to say I've been seeing your face all over social media. You're in Ottawa. You're holding truth to power, and that's what it seems like your organization's all about. Tell me, who is the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, and what is the main goal? Where did it start, and what is this all about?
Oh man, yeah. So we've been around for a little over 30 years now, right? And we really developed, I would say, in Saskatchewan and Alberta, but now we're really a cross-country organization, and we are completely funded by Canadian taxpayers who believe in three, I would say simple, but to me, probably to you, very powerful ideals, right? Lower taxes, less government waste, and more government accountability. So that's kind of what we're fighting for all the time. I'm in Ottawa. I have colleagues all across Canada who are holding their provincial governments to account, their municipal governments to account, and obviously helping me out here with the Trudeau government, because when it comes to taxes, waste, and a lack of accountability, there is a ton to talk about here in Ottawa.
Well, it seems like there's no shortage of waste that's happening in our government at the moment. We have new scandals every other week. Arrive Can app cost $54 million. We have just last year it was $600 billion just unaccounted for. Money that just, well, what happened to that?
Let's talk about the waste, right? Because we hear about, oh, well, don't you need all this taxation to fund this or that? Well, here's the simple truth of it. We're all paying way too much tax because the government is wasting too much money. Let's talk about a few of these smaller items here, then we'll get to the bigger items. Here's a good example of waste. The federal government, in its infinite wisdom, spent more than 8,000 smackers on a sex toy show in Germany. Now, call me old-fashioned, but if the Germans want to fund a sex toy show, they should do it with their own money, not the money of Canadian taxpayers.
And there's no shortage of people that are willing to throw money at that stuff anyway. Why are we paying for that? What is the thought behind that?
Oh, I have no idea. I would even try to put myself in the space of bureaucrats who think that was a good idea. Now, one that really irks me, you and your audience may have heard of this recently, but was the Governor General, Mary Simon, who spent, her and her entourage, about 29 other people, spent $1 million on a week-long trip to the Middle East back in March. More than $1 million on a week-long trip. Okay, so what did taxpayers get for that? Well, it turns out that included in the tab, they spent nearly six figures on airplane food. 6 figures on airplane food. And what really ticked me off, besides just the overall price tag, was the fact that you had the Governor General and her band of bureaucrats misleading Canadians, trying to downplay the extravagance. Simon essentially said, well, look, these costs were similar to the food that you'd get on a normal airline experience. Paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she said. Well, here's the thing. We had the receipts. We dug them up through an access to information request, and it wasn't the normal airline food that you would have on Air Canada or WestJet or maybe even Sunwing, okay? What they were enjoying were beef Wellington, beef carpaccio. I had to Google some of this stuff up. They had like buttery chicken, tikka masala. They had like pan-fried scallopini. Sounds pretty good. They even spent like nearly $190 on VIP sliced fruit. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. Like, Canadians have been struggling for at least 2+ years now through very, very difficult lockdowns, rising taxes, high inflation, and it's like a slap in the face when you turn on the news, when you check Twitter, check Facebook, check YouTube, and you find out these stories: $100,000 on airplane food, $8,000 on a sex toy show in Germany. Someone who could it have been spending $6,000 per night on a single hotel room in London.
So when I was growing up in Canada, my whole life, I've always thought, okay, well, we have higher taxes, but this money is going to go to, a safety net that other countries don't have. They're less fortunate people in other lands that if all else fails, at least they got that safety net. Everything is going to take care of them. And, if taxes have to go up a little bit more to take care of that. But it seems like all of our infrastructure that we have is all just falling apart. We're not getting anything out of it at this point. Like, most people are being left holding the bag in this whole thing. Now, a lot of people are wondering, are we even going to get to have pensions in the future? So most people understand it as, well, the government takes your CPP contributions, they call them. It is a tax because it's not the same as a contribution, where if your contributions go up, your whatever you receive goes up as well. But people don't understand that the government doesn't hold on to that money. It's not collecting interest or any of this stuff. They're paying old investors with new investment money. I guess you could call that a Ponzi scheme. But a lot of people have been a lot of people have been really worried because a lot of Canadians are not saving for their own retirement. It's not a very good economy to be saving for your own retirement. Most people don't have that extra bit. What is the Taxpayer Federation doing to hold the government accountable when it comes to the contributions that we've all been putting in our entire lives and are expecting to get something out of?
Oh, we've been hammering the government about some of its things like the CPP. What's so crazy right now is the level of debate in Canada. You would be surprised how many political pundits there are twisting themselves into a pretzel, trying to argue that somehow these mandatory payments into the CPP that comes off her paycheck is not a tax. I swear that I have had number of debates, at least a handful of debates, just arguing that in fact the CPP, the EI are taxes. But these people are trying to say, no, it's a fee, or no, it's a price. It's absolutely not a fee or a price. And let me explain a few reasons why, okay? A price is something you choose to pay, right? You go to Subway, you pay a price for a sandwich. Even if you go get insurance from Manulife, right? You choose which type of insurance you want to get, or even if you want to get insurance, you make that choice. There is no choice that you make when it comes to the CPP tax. I would say you absolutely have to pay it, or the tax man is going to come after you in full effect. But it's also not a fee. A fee is something you pay for a service that is yours. For example, you go to a passport office, you pay about 160 smackers to wait in line for 6 hours and get your passport renewed. It's your passport. Now, here's the difference to the CPP, and it's what you were kind of talking about. When you pay into the CPP, you are largely funding someone else's retirement. Mm-hmm. And then for you to get that money back, you have to rely on the good faith of politicians to keep the fund healthy decades down the road. But you do not own the money that you pay into the CPP like you would own the money that you pay for anything privately, because you can't fully transfer it upon death. So these are absolutely taxes. The CPP is a tax. The EI is a tax. If you're making about $67,000 or more this year, you're paying an extra $300 through these two payroll taxes. In total, you're paying about $4,700. Now, what are we doing to try to hold these governments accountable? Well, one example, and I talked about this both times, is appearing in the House of Commons during the budget recommendations, appearing in the Senate about their budget update. We do stuff like that. We do media about this all the time. But the way that we really hold governments accountable isn't from people like me. It's the 235,000 supporters that we have across Canada who engage with their politicians, whether it's emails, whether it's phone calls, or whether it's through the political process when people are singing for their soup, knocking on their doors come election time.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I think the thing you really nailed on there was the equitability of the Canadian pensions. There is no equity in it if it being not transferable. So if your loved one dies, the like if if a husband worked his whole life and the wife didn't, it's not transferable to the wife for her to take that pension and be able to live off of that if she stayed home and didn't actually contribute to paying the bills and all of that. It's really How do you stay from being frustrated in this position? Like, I really want to know this, because it's so enraging to see what they're doing with our money, just giving it away willy-nilly. Foreign governments. How do you keep your cool, honestly?
Well, yeah. You know what? Let me tell you one other, because you brought up inequity, unfairness. Let me tell you what I believe is the fundamental unfairness in Canada. Well, look, there's many different unfairnesses, so I don't mean to say that this is the only one. But let me talk to you about a very big taxpayer unfairness. If we're going to talk about equity, we have to talk about this. And it's and I think this has really developed, at least throughout the pandemic. What we saw during COVID-19 was a tale of two pandemics, right? Some people were devastated. The private sector, taxpayers, were devastated. How many people lost their jobs? How many people took significant pay cuts? How many friends do you have who may be gym owners, who may be restaurant owners, who are worried that their life savings couldn't keep the lights on?
So many.
Now,
so many.
Let's flip the script. Let's look at the other side of the equation. The government employees, the politicians. While you and yours were struggling through COVID-19, your supposed member of parliament, your apparent representative, gave themselves 3 pay raises. MPs took 3 pay raises during the pandemic. Okay, they range from an extra $10,000 for a backbencher, so they're collecting dust. They're also collecting an extra $10,000 salary, all the way up to an extra $21,000 for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Okay, so you struggled. Your apparent representative took pay raise after pay raise after pay raise.
Well,
it doesn't stop there.
It's like, do you see what I'm saying? Argument to see who actually is representing who in these situations, and a lot of Canadians are really frustrated with that whole situation. But let's talk about pay raises. I know the government employees are all giving themselves pay raises, but there's the Bank of Canada recently.
Yeah,
they've first time ever have lost money. The first, as far as I'm aware of, the first time ever in Q4 of 2022. Lost, I forget the figure. It was just somewhere in the ridiculous ballpark of money. And this is all because interest rates have gone up and there's too much debt to service, for which Trudeau, I think, was quoted, historic lows, we got to borrow money, something along those lines. But the Bank of Canada just gave themselves $407 million worth of raises this year. And that's for just a little over 2,000 people. Why do they deserve a raise?
Well, so what I saw from the Bank of Canada, at least the numbers from the CTF, was that they gave themselves $45 million in bonuses and raises over the 2 years of the pandemic. Now, I can't believe we have to say this, but bonuses and raises are for when you do a good job. And the Bank of Canada, if you've left your home in the past 2 years, you know the Bank of Canada has not done a good job. In fact, the Bank of Canada failed to do its only job. Its only job is to keep inflation low and around 2%. Well, if you've gone to a gas station, if you've paid your heating bill, if you've tried to pick up ground beef at the Sobeys, the Independent, the No Frills, you know that the Bank of Canada did not keep inflation low.
No.
Even the Bank of Canada has acknowledged that it should be held accountable for missing its inflation target. Now, isn't that a funny little way to hold your organization accountable than to turn around and hand out $45 million in bonuses and pay raises during a pandemic and as inflation took off? Look, best case scenario, the Bank of Canada failed to do its job. It failed to keep a lid on rising prices. However, worst case scenario, I think the more likely scenario is that the Bank of Canada is driving the inflation that we're seeing today. Why? Because the Bank of Canada, during the pandemic, printed about $300 billion out of thin air and dumped it into an economy that had revolving government lockdowns for 2 years. It created the perfect storm for inflation, which is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Now, here's the thing. The Bank of Canada spinsters, they don't want you to know this, but the more dollars that they print, the less that your dollars in your savings account can buy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
There's no added value to the economy. There's no increased value. They're just slicing that bread thinner. One loaf is just getting everybody's getting their money diluted. Their savings are just washing away every time that they print dollars from the Bank of Canada. And they'll say that they're not printing money, that it's issuance of new credit and lines of credit.
No, they're printing money.
It's the
but they're
same
being
thing.
absolutely incorrect. They're playing absolute word semantics with Canadians. Look, you can go on the Bank of Canada and you can just look at their balance sheet. Okay, it grew. Well, during the heart of the pandemic, it grew by further than this. But the last I checked, it grew by over $300 billion, which essentially means that they have $300 billion of additional financial assets. Okay, so how did the Bank of Canada get the money to purchase $300 billion of financial assets?
Well,
Did they have a bake sale? No, they didn't have a bake sale. They weren't out there selling cookies. They're clicking a keypad.
Yeah, just adding a couple more zeros to their own account.
Yeah, and they were largely buying Government of Canada debt. This is the inflation tax, where you largely have the bank, or I shouldn't say largely, but you have the Bank of Canada financing Ottawa's deficits. Okay, so that's one hand of the equation. Let's look at the other hand of the equation, the supply side. Well, what was going on the supply side, right? 2 years of revolving government lockdowns, which obviously hinder output, right? The goods that money buys. But also, you had the federal government paying people not to work. Well, what happens when you pay people not to work? You get less people working.
Yeah.
Also, as an economy starts to open up, here's what a lot of politicians don't realize is that restarting an economy takes a lot longer than flicking on the light switch in the kitchen. Okay, so on the one hand, you have the Bank of Canada printing hundreds of billions of dollars out of thin air. And on the other hand, you have a lack of supply, or at least a limiting supply. So this is why the inflation is the way it is today.
Well, and we have high interest rates to reward ourselves with that high inflation that we've been suffering for so long. Franco Terrazzano, I really want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, and just for interest in keeping it short and getting the message out there as far as I can. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing with me your insight of what's going on and trying to keep it cool, because I get so mad just listening to this stuff. I got to give you so much credit for that.
Hey man, thanks for letting me have me on your show and speak to your audience. And if anyone wants to learn more, check out taxpayer.com. You can find us on Facebook. Just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation. You can find us on YouTube, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. You can follow me on Twitter, just at Franco_nomics. But again, thank you so much for letting me speak to your audience.
Perfect. And thank you so much for joining. And I'll make sure I have all the links in the description down below. So make sure you go down into the description, click those links, and check out all the stuff all the articles that Franco's been writing. Some fantastic stuff. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Keep on trucking.